It was one of those days in early spring when the sun peeked through the clouds just enough to warm the cobblestone streets of Esterfield, a sleepy town nestled between the hills of southern France. I had moved here a few months ago, seeking peace away from the bustling world I had known, away from the city, away from noise, and away from myself. I wasn't looking for anything when I passed the little flower shop on Rue des Fleurs, its window filled with delicate pink peonies and bright yellow daffodils. The scent of fresh blooms wafted into the air, catching my attention. But it wasn't just the flowers that stopped me, it was him. I only caught a glimpse through the window, a man with dark, tousled hair, focused on arranging a bouquet of roses. He had an air of quiet concentration, like the world outside didn't matter as long as he was surrounded by those blooms. He was unaware of my gaze, absorbed in his work. But something about the way he moved, the tenderness in the way he held the flowers, made me stop right there on the street. I wasn't the type to linger, especially not over a stranger in a flower shop. But for some reason I did. And as I turned to leave, I wondered how a person could become so lost in the beauty of something as simple as flowers. The next day, I found myself back on Rue des Fleurs. For no reason at all except curiosity. I told myself I was just window shopping, but truthfully, I was looking for him again. His name, I would soon learn, was Vincent Lefebvre, and his family had owned the shop, Les Fleurs d'Esterfield, for generations. It was a humble place, more intimate than any of the grand florists I had known back home. Inside, the atmosphere was calm and welcoming. The walls were lined with bouquets, vases, and dried flowers hanging from the ceiling like delicate ornaments. And there he was, arranging some wild flowers on the counter, a serene look on his face. Bonjour, I greeted him, my voice a little uncertain. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine, and smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting with a quiet warmth that made me feel strangely at home. Bonjour, he replied. Can I help you with something today? I could hardly believe I was here again. I was just looking, I said, my hands awkwardly adjusting the strap of my bag. I've always liked flowers. Then you're in the right place, Vincent said with a small chuckle. You don't need a reason to like them. Everyone has a flower that speaks to them. I hadn't expected a simple conversation about flowers to feel so comforting. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was peaceful, like being in the presence of someone who understood the small, beautiful moments that made life worth living. Over the next few weeks, I found myself visiting the shop more often, sometimes for no reason at all. I was just drawn to the quiet rhythm of the place, and to Vincent, whose presence seemed to fill the space with something I couldn't quite explain. His hands, always so gentle as he arranged flowers, moved with a care I hadn't seen in a long time. One afternoon, as I walked in, he was carefully trimming a bouquet of violets. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting soft shadows on his face. Is it always this peaceful here? I asked, leaning against the counter, unable to help myself. Vincent looked up, offering another of his warm smiles. It's the flowers, he said simply. They have a way of making everything feel right. I couldn't help but agree. There was something about the way he spoke with such sincerity that made the world outside seem far away. I started to visit him more frequently, not because I needed flowers, but because, for some reason, being near him made the chaos of my own life feel more manageable. It wasn't long before our conversations moved beyond flowers. We began to share bits of our lives with each other, exchanging stories as I helped him sort through the various arrangements, or sometimes just standing by while he worked. I'm actually terrible at small talk, I confessed one afternoon. It's one of the reasons I left the city. Vincent looked at me, intrigued. Why did you leave? I needed space, I said, not sure why I was telling him this. I was overwhelmed. Life in the city was too fast, too loud. I needed a change. So I came here to Esterfield, hoping to slow down. His expression softened, and I couldn't help but notice how his eyes seemed to understand me more than anyone ever had. It's good you found a place like this, he said, his voice gentle. The world moves quickly, but nature, flowers, remind us to slow down. There was a pause, a quiet moment between us, and I felt a strange warmth spread through me. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something deeper than friendship. A bond formed in the most unexpected of places. The more I visited, the more I realized how much I looked forward to seeing Vincent. We shared a comfort in silence that I had never known before. It wasn't like the noisy conversations I was used to in a city, where everything felt forced. With Vincent, it was effortless. It was like we spoke a language that didn't need words. One day, I arrived at the shop to find Vincent working on a special arrangement for a wedding. He was focused, but as he glanced up, I caught his eye and saw something I hadn't seen before, something beyond the calm, measured pace he usually kept. It was a hint of vulnerability, like he was holding back something. "Are you okay?" I asked, stepping closer. He paused, looking down at the flowers in his hands. "It's nothing," he said quietly, but his voice had a hint of sadness to it. Sometimes the things I care about the most are the hardest to keep." There was an honesty in his words that made my heart ache. I didn't know what he was going through, but I knew one thing for certain. I wanted to be there, to understand him. As spring moved into summer, the town of Esterfield bloomed in ways I hadn't expected. The town square was alive with market stalls, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh herbs and flowers. But there was something deeper growing between Vincent and me, something neither of us had fully acknowledged. One evening, after the shop closed, Vincent invited me to walk with him through the fields behind the flower shop. The evening sun cast a golden hue over the lavender and wildflowers, painting everything in a soft, romantic light. As we walked side by side, Vincent turned to me. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "We've spent so much time together, but I don't know where this is going." I stopped walking, looking at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he hesitated. "I'm not good at this. I'm not good at being vulnerable, at saying what I feel." For a moment, I was silent, not knowing how to respond. But then I reached out and touched his arm gently. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. I'm here, Vincent. That's all that matters." And in that moment, something shifted between us. We didn't need grand declarations or sweeping gestures. What we had was something far more meaningful, something rooted in quiet understanding. One evening, as I entered the shop to buy a bouquet of daisies, I found the shop unusually quiet. Vincent was standing by the counter, his hands resting on his hips, and his expression was serious. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I've been avoiding this, but I can't anymore." My heart raced. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine. "I think I'm falling for you." I felt my breath catch in my throat, but the words didn't feel as surprising as I had imagined. In truth, I had been feeling the same way for weeks, if not longer. "I think I'm falling for you too," I said softly, my heart beating faster. There it was, out in the open. The unspoken feelings that had been growing between us had finally been acknowledged, and it felt right, like the most natural thing in the world. From that moment on, everything changed. Vincent and I began spending even more time together. Not just in the flower shop, but in the world outside it as well. We explored the hills, went for long walks in the lavender fields, and talked about everything from our pasts to our hopes for the future. There was no pressure, no rush, just two people who had found something rare. And every time I walked past the shop now, I couldn't help but smile. The flowers weren't just arrangements anymore. They were a symbol of what had blossomed between us. And as we continued to grow together, I knew that the love we had found was as beautiful and as enduring as the flowers Vincent so lovingly cared for. Years passed, and the shop became a place not just for flowers, but for memories. Vincent and I had built a life together in Esterfield, surrounded by the blooms that had brought us together. It was a life of quiet moments of growing love and of promises kept. And as we stood together, hand in hand, watching the flowers bloom around us, I knew that the love we shared would continue to grow, forever, like the flowers in our garden. Ready to improve your English in a fun and engaging way? Start learning through stories today. Subscribe to Learn with Godson and dive into captivating stories that will help you expand your vocabulary, understand sentence structures, and practice pronunciation. Stories make learning English exciting and memorable. Join us on this journey and watch your language skills grow with each story. The voiceover in this video is given by Learn with Godson. Copying or re-uploading is prohibited.